I've always loved snow. Not in the casual way people talk about liking winter, but in a deep, almost obsessive way. Snowfall has a sound to it. Soft, muted, almost sacred. When it's coming down heavy enough, the world feels paused, like reality itself is holding its breath. I get the same feeling watching lightning crack across the sky or spotting a shooting star. You don't control it. You don't summon it. It just happens. And when it does, you're lucky if you're there to witness it. That night, the snow wasn't supposed to fall at all. I know that for a fact because I'm the kind of person who checks the weather constantly during the winter. Obsessively, honestly. I'd checked it earlier that evening. Clear skies, cold but dry. No snow until at least the following week. So when I looked out my bedroom window and saw thick white flakes pouring down like someone had dumped the sky upside down, it felt unreal. I was sitting on my bed reading, half hungover from the night before. I didn't have work the next day, which meant it was probably a Saturday. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in late at night when nothing is demanding your attention. The snow had already coated the ground by the time I noticed it. No gentle build-up, no warning. Just suddenly, winter had arrived, and immediately I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Go for a walk. I'm not much of a hiker. I don't seek out trails or spend weekends in nature. But snow changes things. Snow makes everything feel temporary, like the world is brand new and about to disappear again. I live in a semi-wooded area. Not deep forest, but close enough. If I drove 5 minutes, I could access a massive stretch of dense woods crisscrossed with hiking trails. One trail in particular barely saw any foot traffic, especially at night. I didn't overthink it. I grabbed my jacket, boots, and gloves and headed out. The drive was short and uneventful. When I pulled into the small gravel lot near the trailhead, there were no other cars. That wasn't unusual, especially this late and with snow coming down like that. I stepped out and just stood there for a moment. The snow was falling thick and heavy, swallowing sound. The air smelled sharp and clean. My breath fogged in front of me, and the world felt impossibly still. I started walking. I didn't have a destination in mind, no goal. I just wanted to get far enough into the woods that the road noise vanished completely. After about 20 minutes, I felt satisfied. The trees were thick around me, their branches sagging under the weight of fresh snow. That's when I stopped, and that's when I heard it. Hi. It was faint, but unmistakable. A child's voice. At first, my brain refused to process it. I actually laughed under my breath, shaking my head. Snow does weird things to sound. Wind carries voices. You hear things that aren't really there. But then I heard it again. Hi. Clearer this time. A little boy. I froze. The woods were empty. I could see a good distance between the trees thanks to the reflective snow, and there was no movement. No footsteps, no shadows. The worst part wasn't the voice itself. It was that I couldn't tell where it came from. It felt like it was everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing softly between the trees. I turned in a slow circle, heart beginning to pound. "Hello?" I called out, instantly regretting it. Silence. I told myself it was time to leave. I took one step back toward the direction I'd come from. That's when the voice spoke again. "Up here, silly." I don't know why I looked up. Instinct, I guess. And there he was. A boy, maybe 9 years old, sitting casually on a thick tree branch about 30 feet off the ground. My stomach dropped. He was bundled in winter clothes, puffy jacket, snow pants, gloves, boots. He looked perfectly comfortable, legs dangling, hands resting at his sides. The tree was tall and straight, no low branches, no obvious way to climb it. Seeing him should have made me panic more. Instead, it did the opposite. Something about finally knowing where the voice was coming from calmed me, even though nothing about the situation made sense. I walked closer, never taking my eyes off him. He smiled. Not a normal smile. It was too wide, too deliberate, like someone who knew what a smile was supposed to look like, but hadn't quite mastered it yet. That's when I noticed the snow around the tree. There were no footprints. None. Not leading to the tree, not circling it. Not even beneath it. The snow was pristine, which meant one of two things. Either he'd climbed the tree before it started snowing, or he hadn't climbed it at all. The lowest branch was at least 20 feet up. Even with experience, climbing that tree would have been nearly impossible. The trunk was smooth, straight, and wide. He waved at me. I swallowed hard. "How did you get up there?" I asked. He tilted his head. "It's a secret." Then he smiled again. I didn't know what to do. My mind raced. This was a kid, a child alone in the woods, in the middle of a snowstorm. I felt responsible, compelled to help. Before I could speak again, he stood up on the branch. "Watch this," he said cheerfully. Then he leaned backward and fell. I screamed. He dropped at least 30 feet, landing flat on his back with a sickening heavy thud that echoed through the trees. There's no way snow could cushion a fall like that. I ran toward him, heart slamming in my chest, but before I reached him, he sprang to his feet. Like nothing had happened. Then he laughed, a high, broken laugh that didn't sound human at all. And he ran, straight into the woods. I stood there in shock for half a second too long, then chased after him. I still don't understand why. Every logical instinct should have told me to turn around, to run the other way. But I didn't. His footprints were visible in the snow, impossibly light for someone who'd just fallen from a tree. I followed them, breathing hard. That's when I heard him again, laughing, not giggling, cackling. It echoed around me, circling, taunting. As I passed one of the trees, something slammed into my back. I hit the ground hard. He was on top of me. I screamed as sharp pain exploded across my neck and shoulders. His fingernails dug into my skin, tearing, clawing. I flailed, grabbing at him blindly, feeling warm blood soak through my gloves. He wailed, loud, piercing, inhuman. I managed to get my feet under me, adrenaline surging, and with everything I had, I threw him over my shoulder. He hit the snow, rolled once, then stood up immediately, still laughing, and disappeared into the trees. This time I didn't follow. I stood there shaking, blood dripping onto the snow. My neck burned. My hands were slick and red. I wrapped my hat around my neck, pressing hard, trying to stop the bleeding. The next 20 minutes are a blur. I remember stumbling, falling, crying, then flashing lights. I woke up in an ambulance. Later, at the hospital, police asked me to tell my story over and over again. I didn't understand why they looked so skeptical, until they told me what they found. They'd searched the woods. They followed my footprints. Only mine. There were no others. No child. No chase. No struggle. Just one set of tracks leading into the woods and back out. A few days later, I returned to the trail. Fresh snow had buried everything. There was no sign anyone had ever been there. And I've never gone walking in the snow alone again. Snow has a way of making the world feel isolated, even when it's normally familiar. It drapes everything in a uniform white blanket, erasing landmarks, muffling sound, and slowing time itself. That night, I learned just how unnerving that quiet can be. It was winter break during my sophomore year of college, and I had the house to myself for nearly 2 weeks. The first week passed uneventfully, but the second week brought something different. A massive snowstorm had been predicted, and by the time Saturday morning arrived, nearly a foot of snow had already fallen, and it was still coming down in relentless sheets. The roads were impossible. Plows struggled to keep up, and by mid-afternoon, most cars were abandoned where they'd stalled. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. Houses were spread far apart in my neighborhood, and between them, thick wooded areas made the streets feel like tunnels cut into the snow. I was trapped in isolation, but bored out of my mind. I decided on a ridiculous plan. My only friend who lived nearby, Ryan, had been around the day before, so I figured, why not walk to his house and surprise him? It was only 1.5 miles. Easy, in theory. I bundled up and started trudging through the snow. At first, it was almost magical. The streetlights reflected off the thick blanket of white, casting a soft glow. The snow muted every sound except the crunch of my boots. For a moment, it almost felt serene. But the magic faded halfway to Ryan's. The route cuts through a stretch of road with no houses for a long distance, bordered by dense trees and empty lots. The snow was deep, the wind biting, and I was utterly alone. Then I saw headlights in the distance, a snowplow. It moved slowly but steadily, crunching through the white. I froze, watching. Then, without warning, the plow veered sharply to the right, skidding off the road and disappearing into the trees. A muffled crash echoed through the stillness. My first thought, someone must be hurt. I ran toward the sound, snow slowing me down with every step. When I reached the crash site, I found the plow, a large industrial vehicle, crumpled against a tree. Its engine hummed, headlights glowing, but it was empty. No driver, no passenger, nothing. The windshield wasn't shattered. No one could have crawled out unnoticed. I checked again, running around the vehicle in disbelief. Both seats were empty. The engine was still running. The plow had literally vanished. I felt my stomach knot. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, and I obeyed. As I backed away, I heard a man's voice, shouting, screaming for help. It came from behind me, closer, too close. I didn't look back. I ran the rest of the way to Ryan's house, my heart hammering. By the time I reached him, I was nearly breathless, coated in snow, shaking like a leaf. I tried to explain what I had seen, but even I wasn't sure how it sounded out loud. Ryan's dad called the police. I expected them to find the plow, investigate the accident, trace tire tracks in the snow. But when they did, they found nothing, not a single tire mark. Not a single footprint except mine. They insisted no plow had ever been there. I argued. I begged. I described the sound, the headlights, the engine noise. They refused to believe me. Eventually, frustrated and exhausted, I stayed at Ryan's for the night. Sleep didn't come easily. My mind replayed the scene over and over, the sound of the crunching snow, the veer, the crash, the empty seats, the impossibly close scream. When morning arrived and the plows finally cleared the streets, Ryan's dad drove me home. Nothing had changed. The snow covered every track. No trace of the plow. Nothing. It wasn't a hallucination. The memory is too vivid, the fear too real. And yet, the evidence didn't exist. That night, I realized that snow, for all its beauty, can hide things that are impossible to explain. I was 17 when it happened, commuting home from my private school by train. Most days it was routine. Wake up early, catch the morning train, then back home in the afternoon. It was tedious, sure, but I liked the rhythm. A few friends and I would hang out, joke around, talk about track practice or school gossip. Life felt ordinary, until the storm. It was midwinter, a cold night, and the sky turned heavy with snow while we were still on the train. Within minutes, the snowfall became relentless, a full-on blizzard. We were the last train on that line. No other trains were allowed to depart due to the storm. Visibility dropped almost immediately. Thick flakes slashed against the windows, and the overhead lights of the train reflected off the snow, turning the world outside into a chaotic white haze. My friends, Charles and James, got off at their stops without issue. I was alone on the final leg, and my station was isolated. To reach home, I had to cross a highway and then walk over a mile through a heavily wooded stretch. I stepped onto the platform, and for a moment, the scene almost seemed beautiful. The station lights reflected off the snow. Everything glowed white, and the usual clamor of traffic was gone. Except, of course, for the blizzard. That quiet, that frozen stillness felt wrong. I started walking, boots crunching in deep snow. The highway, surprisingly, had no cars, no traffic. Nothing moved except me. My chest tightened at the silence. There's something about an empty road in the middle of a snowstorm that tricks your mind into thinking the world itself has vanished. After crossing, I entered the wooded stretch. Tall pines lined both sides, snow-laden branches brushing together in the wind, forming a tunnel-like canopy. The trail was narrow, winding, and I could barely see more than a few yards ahead. My breath fogged in front of me. Every sound was amplified. The crack of a branch, the scrape of snow underfoot, the whistle of wind through trees. Then I saw him, a man, standing directly on the path ahead. No one else in sight, just him. The first thing I noticed was his clothing. Shorts, short sleeves. In the middle of a blizzard. His hair plastered against his head by wind and snow, face pale, eyes dark and gleaming. His expression, wrong. A twisted smile that didn't reach his eyes. I froze. My mind tried to rationalize. Maybe he was a hiker, maybe someone caught unprepared. But the clothing, the location, the isolation, all of it screamed danger. Then, in a single motion, he moved. He didn't run. He didn't walk. He lunged. I bolted, heart hammering, lungs screaming for air, boots sinking into deep snow. His footsteps behind me, too fast, too light, unnatural. The trail felt endless. Every time I glanced back, he was closer, and that smile never faded. I scrambled, twisted, nearly fell multiple times, my hands raw from gripping the snow and tree branches. I screamed. No one answered. The woods were mercilessly silent aside from my own panic and the thundering of snow underfoot. Suddenly, I broke out of the tree line onto a small road. Streetlights flickered above me, and for a moment I dared to look back. Nothing. I slowed, chest heaving, snow soaking through my coat, fingers numb. But the terror hadn't faded. That man had disappeared into thin air. I ran the rest of the way home. My parents were waiting, worried, sick. I tried to explain what happened. Tried to describe the figure, the movement, the inhuman speed. My dad grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate, but my mother stopped him. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. Tracks in the snow? Only mine. No footprints leading from him. No trace of passage. I never saw him again. Weeks later, I realized something worse. The woods behind my house would always feel wrong. Even in summer, the shadows felt heavier. In winter, the snow seemed to hide something waiting. And sometimes, when I walk alone at night, I swear I can feel the eyes of that man in the woods, just beyond the edge of the trees, waiting, smiling,